What do you do when you just can't figure something out? For zombies, it's pretty simple. They can just keep bashing their brains against the wall. But living brains are a lot more complex. It turns out, though, that if you understand just a little bit of some of the basics about how your brain works, you can learn more easily and be less frustrated. Researchers have found that we have two fundamentally different modes of thinking. Here, I'll call them the focused and the diffuse modes. We're familiar with focusing. It's when you concentrate intently on something you're trying to learn or to understand. But we're not so familiar with diffuse thinking. Turns out that this more relaxed thinking style is related to a set of neural resting states. We're going to use an analogy of the game of pinball to help us understand these two thinking modes. Incidentally, both metaphor and analogy are really helpful when you're trying to learn something new. If you remember, a pinball game works by you pull back on the plunger, release it, and a ball goes boinking out, bouncing around on the rubber bumpers, and that's how you get points. So, here's your brain with the ears right here and the eyes looking upwards, and we can lay that pinball machine right down inside it. So there you go. There's the analogy for the focus mode. The blue rubber bumpers here are placed very close to one another. See the orange pattern here towards the top? It represents a familiar thought pattern, maybe involving something simple like adding some numbers, or more advanced ideas like literary criticism or calculating electromagnetic flux. You think a thought, boom, it takes off, moves smoothly along, and then as it's bouncing around on the bumpers, you're able to figure out the problem you're trying to solve or the concept you're trying to understand that's related to something you're rather familiar with. So look at how that thought moves smoothly around on the fuzzy underlying orange neural pathway. In some sense, it's as if it's traveling along a familiar, nicely paved road. But what if the problem you're working on needs new ideas or approaches, concepts you haven't thought of before? That's symbolized here by this neural pattern towards the bottom of the pinball machine area. But if you haven't thought that thought before, you don't even know how that pattern feels or where it is. So how are you going to develop that new thought in the first place? Not only do you not know where the pattern is or what the pattern looks like, but see all the rubber bumpers that are blocking your access, whatever direction you do decide to move in? To get to this new thought pattern, you need a different way of thinking, and that's represented here by the diffuse mode. Look at how widely spaced the rubber bumpers are. Thought takes off. Look at how it moves widely, bounces around. It can travel a long way before being interrupted by hitting a bumper. In this diffuse mode of thinking, you can look at things broadly from a very different big picture perspective. You can make new neural connections traveling along new pathways. You can't focus in as tightly as you often need to finalize any sort of problem solving or understand the finest aspects of a concept, but you can at least get to the initial place you need to be in to home in on a solution. Now, as far as neuroscientists know right now, you're either in the focus mode or the diffuse mode of thinking. It seems you can't be in both thinking modes at the same time. It's kind of like a coin. You can see either one side or the other side of the coin, but not both sides at the same time. Being in one mode seems to limit your access to the other mode's way of thinking. In our next video, we're going to see how some extraordinary people access their diffuse ways of thinking to do great things. Thanks for learning about learning. I'm Barbara Oakley.
Welcome to Learning How to Learn. Your brain has amazing abilities, but it didn't come with an instruction manual. Perhaps the greatest gift that our brains give us is the ability to learn new things every day. On my way here, I thought about the journey that will take us to the last day of the course and how much we will learn along the way. Our goal is to give you a better understanding of how we learn so that your brain becomes a better learner. These insights are based on solid research from neuroscience, from cognitive psychology, and also from dozens of leading instructors and practitioners in difficult-to-learn subjects. Whether you're a novice or an expert, you will find great new ways to improve your skills and techniques for learning, especially related to math and science.
This course is meant to help you reframe how you think about learning, to help reduce your frustration and increase your understanding. We approach things a little differently. You're not expected to have an in-depth background in any particular subject. Instead, you're expected to take these ideas and apply them to whatever subject you're trying to learn or improve in to help you learn more deeply, effectively, and with less frustration. You'll hear experts from a variety of different disciplines talking about their best tips for learning more effectively. You can benefit from these ideas whether you are struggling in high school or soaring through math and science at graduate levels at a university.
I'm a co-director of a science and learning center that is sponsored by the National Science Foundation based here in La Jolla. In recent years, we've made great strides from research in discovering how to learn most effectively. Finding a way to simply and effectively share these ideas with you has been a big undertaking, but we feel it's well worth doing. You'll see that many of these ideas, although simple, are incredibly powerful. And along the way, we will also learn a lot in the process of teaching you. Are incredibly powerful. And along the way, we will also learn a lot in the process of teaching you.
You'll see how you can fool yourself about whether you actually know the material. You'll discover new ways to hold your focus and embed the material more deeply and powerfully in your mind. And you'll learn to condense key ideas you're learning about so you can grasp them more easily. Master the simple, practical approaches outlined here, including simple tips to help prevent procrastination. And you'll be able to learn more effectively and with less frustration. This course is meant to enrich both your learning and your life. You'll be able to get what you want from this material. So welcome to the course
and happy learning.
So let's take a look at some famous people from history who used their different thinking modes to help them with their problem solving. If you look at that guy right there, he was Salvador Dali, a very well-known surrealist painter of the 20th century. He was the very definition of a wild and crazy guy. You can see him here with his pet ocelot, Babu. Dali used to have an interesting technique to help him come up with his fantastically creative surrealist paintings. He'd relax in a chair and let his mind go free, often still vaguely thinking about what he had previously been focusing on. He'd have a key in his hand, dangling it just above the floor, and as he would slip into his dreams, falling asleep, the key would fall from his hand and the clatter would wake him up, just in time so he could gather up those diffuse mode connections and ideas in his mind, and off he'd go, back into the focus mode, bringing with him the new connections he'd made while in the diffuse mode. Now you might think, well, that's okay for an artist. But what does it have to do with more scientific or mathematical kinds of thinking? Well, if you look down here, this guy was Thomas Edison, one of the most brilliant inventors ever. According to legend, what Edison used to do was he'd sit and relax in his chair, holding ball bearings in his hand. He'd relax away, letting his mind run free, although it would often noodle back in a much more relaxed way to what he'd been focusing on previously. When Edison would fall asleep, the ball bearings would drop and clatter to the ground just as with Dali, and it would wake Edison up, and off he'd go with his ideas from the diffuse mode, ready to take them into the focus mode and build on them. So the bottom line is, when you're learning something new, especially something that's a little more difficult, your mind needs to be able to go back and forth between the two different learning modes. That's what helps you learn effectively. You might think of it as a bit analogous to building your strength by lifting weights. You would never plan to compete in a weightlifting competition by waiting until the very day before a meet and then spending that entire day working out like a fiend. It just doesn't happen that way. To gain muscular structure, you need to do a little work every day, gradually allowing your muscles to grow. Similarly, to build neural structure, you need to do a little work every day, gradually allowing yourself to grow a neural scaffold to hang your thinking on. A little bit every day, and that's the trick. In summary, then, we learned that analogies provide powerful techniques for learning. We learned about how the brain's two different thinking modes, focused and diffuse, each helps us learn, but in very different ways. And finally, we learned that learning something difficult can take time. Your brain needs to alternate its ways of learning as it grapples with and assimilates the new material. Thanks for learning about learning. I'm Barbara Oakley.
Welcome to Learning How to Learn. My name is Terry Stanowski. Let me introduce you to your brain. First, some brain surgery. We take off the skull and take out the brain. This brain weighs 3 pounds, but it consumes 10 times more energy by weight than the rest of the body. A very expensive organ. It is the most complex device in the known universe. All of your thoughts, your hopes, your fears are in the neurons in this brain. We prize our abilities to do chess and math, but it takes years of practice to acquire these skills, and digital computers are much better at it than we are. It came as a surprise to discover that what we do so well and take for granted, like seeing, hearing, reaching, running, are all much more complex problems than we thought, and way beyond the capability of the world's fastest digital computers. What this illustrates is that we are not consciously aware of how our brains work. Brains evolved to help us navigate complex environments, and most of the heavy lifting is done below our level of consciousness. And we don't need to know how it's done in order to survive. Psychologists who study the unconscious mind have found that its influences include thought processes, memory, emotions, and motivation. We are only aware of a very small fraction of all the activity in the brain, so we need to rely on brain imaging techniques to guide us. Here is the activity map of someone's brain who was asked to lie still at rest in a brain imaging scanner. On the left is the side view of the brain, and on the right is the view from the midline. The colors indicate brain areas whose activities were highly correlated, as shown by the time courses below, color-coded to the brain areas. The blue areas are highly active when the subject interacts with the world, but turn off in the resting state. The red-orange areas are most active in the resting state and are called the default mode network. Other brain areas are also more active when you are resting, and these areas can be further divided into groups of areas that have common patterns of activity. This is a new and intense area of research, and it will take time to sort out all the resting states and their functions. There are 1,000,000 billion synapses in your brain where memories are stored. The old view of the brain is that once it matures, the strengths of synapses can be adjusted by learning, but the pattern of connectivity does not change much unless there is brain damage. But now we know that brain connectivity is dynamic and remains so even after it matures. With new optical techniques for imaging single connections between neurons called synapses, we can see constant turnover with new synapses being formed and others disappearing. This raises a puzzle. In the face of so much turnover, how do memories stay stable over so many years? This is a picture of one dendritic branch on a neuron which receives inputs from other neurons. The synapses are on the spiny knobs coming off the dendrite. On the top, the dendrite was imaged before learning. The same dendrite is shown below after learning and after sleep. Multiple synapses that are newly formed together on the same branch are indicated by the white arrowheads. You are looking down into the brain of a live animal. This is really a fantastic new technique. Synapses are less than a micron in diameter. In comparison, the human hair is around 20 microns in diameter. This new technique allows us to see how learning changes the structure of the brain with a resolution that is near the limit of light microscopy. This illustrates that, intriguingly, you are not the same person you were after a night's sleep or even a nap. It is as if you went to bed with one brain and woke up with an upgrade. This is a better deal than you can get from Microsoft. Shakespeare, the great English poet, already knew this. Here is Macbeth lamenting his insomnia. Sleep that knits up the raveled sleeve of care, the death of each day's life sore labor's bath, balm of her minds, great nature's second course, chief nourisher in life's feast. Here, Shakespeare is making an analogy between knitted clothes and sleep that knits up the loose threads of experience and concerns during the day and weaves them into the tapestry of your life story. You will learn in this first week how to take advantage of your unconscious mind and also sleep to make it easier to learn new things and solve problems. During the lectures, you may ask yourself, how does the brain do this? A good place to find out more about your brain is the website brainfacts.org. brainfacts1word.org. You will find a wealth of interesting things about brains and behavior, and in particular about learning and memory. I'm Terry Sinofsky. Happy learning until we meet again. In the resting state, the synapses, we can see constant turnover. The same dendrite is shown below after learning and after sleep. Multiple synapses that are newly formed together on the same branch are indicated by the white arrowheads. You are looking down into the brain of a live animal.
This is really a fantastic new technique. Synapses are less than you are knitting. His is making an analogy between knitteth clothes and sleep that knits up the loose threads of experience and concerns during the day and weaves them into the tapestry minds. How does the brain do this? A good place to find out more about your brain is the website brainfacts.org.
Everybody has some issues with procrastination because if you're working on something, it means you're not working on a lot of other things. But some people have more issues with procrastination than others. In this video, we're going to give you a little insight into procrastination, why it arises, and a powerful little tool to help you address it. When you look at something that you really rather not do, it seems that you activate the areas of your brain associated with pain. Your brain, naturally enough, looks for a way to stop that negative stimulation by switching your attention to something else. But here's the trick. Researchers discovered that not long after people might start actually working on what they didn't like, that neural discomfort disappeared. So it seems what happens when you procrastinate is something like this. First, you observe and get a cue about something that causes a tiny bit of unease. You don't like it. So to make the sensation go away, you turn your attention from whatever caused that unease. You turn towards something more pleasant. The result, you feel happier, temporarily. We're going to talk more about procrastination later on, but in the meantime, I'm going to let you in on a handy little mental tool. This tool is called the Pomodoro. It was invented by Francesco Cirillo in the early 1980s. Pomodoro is Italian for tomato. The timer you use often looks like a tomato, and really, a timer is all there is to this elegant little technique. All you need to do is set a timer to 25 minutes. Turn off all interruptions and then focus. That's it. Most anybody can focus for 25 minutes. The only last important thing is to give yourself a little reward when you're done. A few minutes of web surfing, a cup of coffee or a bite of chocolate, even just stretching or chatting mindlessly, allowing your brain to enjoyably change its focus for a while. You'll find that using the Pomodoro technique is very effective. It's a little like doing an intense 25-minute workout at a mental gym, followed by some mental relaxation. Give it a try. Next, we're going to see how one very shy 10-year-old changed her brain. Everybody has working on whatever tool is called like a reward when you're done. You'll find that using the Pomodoro, give it a try. We're going to give you a little Yep, that's me when I was 10. I loved animals, handicrafts, and dreaming. Back then, I was the belligerent queen of anti-math. I neglected, ignored, flunked, and downright hated math and science all through grade school, middle school, and high school. It's strange to realize I'm now a professor of engineering. I enlisted in the Army right out of high school to study language at the Defense Language Institute. That's me at 18, looking very nervous and very focused while throwing a hand grenade. I only started to study math and science when I was 26 years old, after I got out of the military. At first, it was really hard. There were all these quick thinkers in my classes who seemed to get everything a lot easier and faster than me. Sometimes I'd take a break for a few months. I'd go out and work as a Russian translator on Soviet trawlers. That's me up in the Bering Sea. Then I'd come back to school and try and learn some more. As I gained technical know-how, new doors started opening up for me. I ended up working as a radio operator at the South Pole Station in Antarctica. That's where I met my husband. I always say I had to go to the end of the earth to meet that man. Here he is after only 10 minutes outside at minus 70 degrees Fahrenheit with a 60-mile-an-hour wind. The wind chill takes it off the charts. Now, I wasn't natural in math and science, not at all. The way I succeeded was to gradually begin to figure out some tricks. But let's back up a step. In the greater scheme of all the different careers and disciplines that people can pursue, why are those involving math and science sometimes a bit more challenging? We think it may be related, at least in part, to the abstract nature of the ideas. I mean, let's take a cow, for example, out standing in a field. If you have the word cow, you can point right to a cow to learn what that word means. Even the letters for the word cow, C-O-W, are roughly analogous to sounds that they stand for. But for mathematical ideas, there's often no analogous thing you can point to. There are no plus signs standing out in a field, no multiplication, division, or other kinds of things that can directly equate to many mathematical or scientific terms. These terms are more abstract, in other words. Well, you might say, yeah, but what about words like love or zest or hope? Those are all abstract. Yes, they are. But the thing is, these abstract terms are often related to our emotions. We can feel our emotions even if we can't see and point to concrete examples, like we could with the cow.
This means it's important to practice with ideas and concepts you're learning in math and science, just like anything else you're learning, to help enhance and strengthen the neural connections you're making during the learning process.
You can see on your left here the symbolic representation of a thought pattern. Neurons become linked together through repeated use. The more abstract something is, the more important it is to practice in order to bring those ideas into reality for you. Even if the ideas you are dealing with are abstract, the neural thought patterns you are creating are real and concrete. At least they are if you build and strengthen them through practice. Here's a way to picture what's going on. When you first begin to understand something, for example, how to solve a problem, the neural pattern you form is there, but very weak, kind of like the faint pattern at the top of our pinball machine analogy here. When you solve the problem again, fresh from the start, without looking at the solution, you begin deepening that neural pattern, kind of like the darker pattern you see here in the middle. And when you have the problem down cold, so you can go over each step completely and concisely in your mind without even looking at the solution, and you've even had practice on related problems, why then the pattern is like this dark, firm pattern you can see towards the bottom of the pinball frame. Practice makes permanent. When you're learning, What you want to do is study something. Study it hard by focusing intently. Then take a break, or at least change your focus to something different for a while. During this time of seeming relaxation, your brain's diffuse mode has a chance to work away in the background and help you out with your conceptual understanding. Your neural mortar, in some sense, has a chance to dry. If you don't do this, if instead you learn by cramming, your knowledge base will look more like this, all in a jumble with everything confused, a poor foundation. If you have problems with procrastination, that's when you want to use the Pomodoro, that brief timer. This helps you get going using brief periods each day of focused attention that will help you start building the neural patterns you need to be more successful in learning more challenging materials. Next up, we'll be talking about chunking, the vital essence of how you grasp and master key ideas. I'm Barbara Oakley.